Hello once again, YouTube. Now, I've got something really interesting to discuss today. I got me a very, very unusual email recently, and a PM over YouTube, and I think it's the kind of thing that anyone who pokes their nose into certain, shall we say, philosophical areas gets eventually on YouTube. And that is something importuning you to accept a particular belief system because if you don't you're going to go to hell, or you're not going to get into heaven or whatever. Now, I won't give you the user's name because I don't think that's terribly fair, but the email itself is worrying. It's really worrying because I assumed when I read it that it was from a child or an adolescent, simply because of the way it's constructed and the way it's worded. There's no punctuation, there are no sentences, there's no paragraphs. The only punctuation that appears are exclamation marks, and there are loads of them. There are multiple exclamation marks in this, and it's just one block of text talking to me about how, oh, Jesus Christ demands this, and Jesus Christ wants that, and blah 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 blah, and if I don't do it then I'm going to go to hell, and oh dear God, it's a bizarre thing to send to someone who doesn't believe in the mythology that you're trying to promote in the first place, and this is something I don't quite understand. Telling me, or anyone, that I'm going to go to hell, or that I'm not going to get into heaven, which is basically the same threat, really, doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything if I don't already believe in the stories upon which the notions of heaven or hell, the eschatological notions of heaven or hell, are founded. It's an utterly redundant promise or threat, depending on how you want to look at it. It's like saying, if I don't die with a sword in my hand, I won't go to Valhalla. It's utterly meaningless. Furthermore, I really have issue with this notion that this person sent me this email, as they proclaim, because they care, because they're concerned for my soul or whatever. You don't know me. You don't know who I am. You have, for all you know, our personalities may clash horribly. You may think that I am the most monstrous arsehole ever to exist, and that I well deserve hellfire. So, and this notion of automatic blanket concern for other people's souls, I find very suspect. It's like the notion, if you love everyone, then you technically love no one. It's a presumption of concern, and to be quite honest, I don't believe it anyway. I think that the person who sent me the email feels obliged to be concerned, or thinks that they should be concerned, as an obligation of their particular faith, but doesn't. In point of fact, really couldn't give a shit. What they care about is fulfilling the obligation, and of, in fact, earning their own way into paradise everlasting, or avoiding the wrath of whatever god they subscribe to. There's also an incredible amount of what I can only refer to as cognitive dissonance in this message, because it, on the one hand, it says things such as, I'm only saying this because I care, because I'm concerned for your immortal soul. And then, with the other, it becomes, the tone shifts completely, and it starts becoming very angry and aggressive. Well, you're an atheist, so you probably won't listen anyway, blah 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 blah. You've already decided that, and you only hate God, etc., etc. It's not the kind of thing where I can go through and tackle each point as it comes, because the points are so conflicted and fragmentary and all over the place. But that concerns me as well. There's something about the tone of desperation that, quite frankly, I find off-putting, to say the least. What I would say to the person who sent me the PM is, if you want to send me another one, then please take time to compose what you're saying and to compose your own perspective, because it's very difficult to get an idea of what you're saying from this, or from what you want to say. And it's not working anyway. It just comes across as, not to mince words, neurotic and aggressive. If you really do want to convince me or anyone else of the legitimacy of your position, this is not the way to do it. Now, getting on to your specific points about heaven and hell, the promise and threat dynamic that eschatology represents immediately makes me suspicious. I want to know why the promise and the threat of anything is necessary to the ideology that you're promoting. For me, if someone says to me, accept this idea and I'll give you this, or accept this idea or I'll do this to you, is exposing how weak not only their own faith in the ideology is, but how weak the ideology and the perspective itself is. The fact that it requires these redundant elements, and the fact that these are intrinsic to the ideology that you're promoting, which, and I may be being presumptuous here, it may not be so, but I'm thinking from the tone of your letter and from what you say that it's a particular form of biblical literalism, a fundamentalist Christianity, if you like. Now, I've read the Bible for myself. I read it at a very, 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 very young age, along with lots of other mythologies. I was very lucky to be raised in a household and in a culture where there was no particular perspective forced on me. My parents are, and I don't mean this insultingly at all, they're simple people. They don't have any grand ideas about life or existence or the meaning of existence or anything to that effect. They have no particular religious bias or atheist bias. They wouldn't describe themselves as atheists, they wouldn't describe themselves as religious. I think if they were asked, they would most likely describe themselves as Church of England, if only because that's what's on their birth certificates. You know, they're the kind of people who just know what they want from existence, do what they can to get it, and that's it. As long as people leave them alone, they'll leave other people alone. So I wasn't preconditioned from an early age with any particular perspective. However, what I was provided with is a wealth of literature and materials. I had a wardrobe when I was young, and it was stocked full of mythological books. I had a beautiful little book of Norse mythology, which I have around here still somewhere. It's falling to bits, but it's beautiful. Another book of Celtic mythology, one that had the story of Beowulf in it with pictures, and it was brilliant. What else did I have? I had books on dinosaurs and on the history of the earth and evolution and science. I had a Bible, as I said earlier. I had exposure to all of these various different ideas and perspectives, and it really never occurred to me, being presented with this broad swathe of mythologies, that Christianity, or rather the story, not Christianity specifically, but rather the stories of the Bible, were any different from the Nordic myths or whatever. It was never an issue for me, and it never became an issue really until much later on, when I started to actually learn about the prevalence of Christianity in Western culture and all that sort of thing.